Hey mates, welcome to the Lose Carry podcast. I'm your host, Phoenix Trinidad, and if you are new here, this is Zero Tackle's weekly NRL podcast where we talk all things rugby league. And this episode, massive weekend of wet weather action. We talk about pretty much all the games. Raiders took their first loss in a very long time, and we have Chris Coleman, Canberra commentator, on to talk about it. And Cam Munster, is he going to the Perth Bears? Is he going to be the marquee signing for the Perth Bears? Genuinely so much to talk about in this episode, so let's get to it. Alrighty, so joining us, as always, Mr. Darren Parkin, Zero Tackle Analyst. How are you, Daz?
Going well, yeah. It was an interesting week if you look at the major contenders, with most of them stumbling a little bit, but some of them won. Obviously, the Storm and the Panthers survived a scare, but the Raiders and the Bulldogs and the Warriors all with hiccups.
Absolutely. Pretty interesting round. A lot of banana peels going on. So someone that will also have a big opinion on that, Lee Addison, rugby league coach. How are you, mate?
Well, unlike the Dogs and Canberra, I didn't stumble and stutter because I've not had a drink for nearly 6 weeks, Phoenix. When I say a drink, I mean an alcoholic drink, not tea or coffee or water.
Yeah. I forgot that this is a sobriety podcast. We've covered a lot of topics on this podcast.
Drink responsibly, children.
And making his Lose Carry debut straight from the Raiders' home of Canberra, Chris Coleman. Hello, mate.
Hello, fellas. Great to be with you. I'm coffeeing up here. There's nothing in that other than milk and some fake sugar. So I'm on the page with you at the moment, Lee, but maybe later, not so much.
It is a Monday morning. And Chris, just for the viewers at home, for people that you're new to, could you just give us a little bit of background of what you do in the rugby league space?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of the play-by-play guys with Raiders on Mix. We've been doing every Raiders game on Canberra's Mix 106.3 going back to the start of the 2018 season. I think, and I'm happy to stand corrected on this, but I think we are the only NRL broadcast team that do our local men and our local women, full commentary team, full broadcast, every game, home and away. And yeah, we've been doing it, like I said, since 2018, and a couple of weeks ago brought up actually our 200th edition of Raiders on Mix. So, basically, there's a group of us. There's myself and Raider Nick and Phil Small, Sammy Rose and Adam Jansen are the main five in the crew. We sort of rotate in and out between different games. But yeah, we are a bunch of Raiders fans who bleed green, and we get the chance to do something that's increasingly rare in sport these days. We get to do a home market call for our team.
Beautiful, and what a week to have you on there with the Raiders' first loss in a long time. So we will get to that in the rundown. Let's get to it. Alrighty, so first thing on the rundown, Lee Addison. So as a rugby league coach, a lot of wet weather footy over the weekend. How much can we actually take away from that? There's a lot of slipping.
Well, Australians complain about this. Have you heard my accent, Phoenix? This is what I grew up playing in and watching games in. This is tropical. This is fantastic weather. But in all seriousness, I think they are professional rugby league players. They will train sometimes in this weather. I mean, all throughout the year in Australia, it will rain at some point. So they will have trained in this. I actually think sometimes too much is read into this, and it basically all it does is slow the game down, in my opinion, make players slip a little bit more and make the possession a little bit harder to keep. Now, that said, it all depends on which team deals with it the best. So let's take Tigers and the Dogs, for example. The Tigers had a higher completion rate, so it wasn't a problem for them, or less of a problem for them. So I think it can be a convenient excuse, but also it can be a great leveller because it can make the slower teams, if you like, more level with the faster teams. Yeah,
absolutely. I love a big, gritty roll around in the mud rugby league type of game. But Chris, like Canberra would, that's not you would understand that weather down there.
Well, yes and no. Canberra gets cold. Canberra doesn't get usually as wet as it did on the weekend. I think there's a bit you can take out of it, and I think you can take it out from a couple of teams over the weekend. Canberra probably at the top of the list, that some teams forget that you've got to do things differently when the ball is wet and the wind is blowing at 50 kilometres an hour. And the Raiders spectacularly failed to take advantage of it. The kicking game didn't change. When you're kicking into the wind, Lee, my understanding has always been, if you're kicking into the wind, you try and kick it low and get it under the wind.
Of course.
It's going to hit the ground and it's going to skid, and give yourself a chance to at least create an opportunity for a knock on there. We saw it. We saw that Canberra struggled with it. I think the North Queensland Cowboys, and they're from Cyclone territory, they had a horrendous first half, and they looked like they just didn't want to be there for much of the game. And I think even the Bulldogs Tigers game on Sunday afternoon was another game where sides didn't necessarily adjust as well as they should. Wet weather, it's a great leveler, and we saw that on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move now to the first game that we'll cover. So, Darren, your Storm got over the Eels 10-16. They struggled a little bit to cover the loss of Jerome Hughes, obviously, who went down last week with an injury.
Yeah, and they didn't necessarily answer those questions necessarily in terms of what they'd be looking to get out of that. Obviously, the Hughes 6 weeks initially for that injury, so they're racing time on that one. Wishart struggled a little bit to have that influence. Obviously, Pap was a little bit rusty. I thought it said a bit about the Eels' level of improvement. They've tightened up a lot of the holes that they had in their group early in the season. They're obviously not winning games, but I think they conceded 56 when they played against the Storm earlier this season. So obviously learnt a bit from that, and they look like they're building a bit more of a base to launch going forward. So yeah, they were more competitive, but the Storm, if their fans were going to walk away thinking that enhanced their chances, they wouldn't have done so, apart from the fact that obviously Warriors, Bulldogs and Raiders losing helps their cause in terms of getting a home final. But yeah, they've still got a few questions to answer, but they did win.
Ryan Pappenhausen has been distracted by all his rugby 360 talk, I think. His game was a little bit off.
Absolutely.
I'd like to give some credit to Parramatta. They've performed quite well in the last few weeks, which seems to coincide with Dylan Brown being either moved around or dropped from the side, which is interesting. But also a guy called Mitchell Moses helped significantly with that team too. To put the performance in some kind of context, the Storm put 56 points on Parramatta in round one, but in this game really struggled to break them down, and in particular the Eels defended really well in the first half on their own goal line. So everybody in Parramatta is currently quite positive. There are some other dynamics which I will unpack a little bit later as we go through the fixtures, in terms of where people are in the ladder, etc., and how that impacts mentality of these games.
Yeah, Parramatta could have done Canberra a huge favour on Friday night, or Thursday night as it was. But I think what they've shown is with the greatest respect to the Eels, to the better sides, they've put out another blueprint on how to beat the Storm. Get in close, don't give them the room to run, as much room to run as they like, and really just stick at the task. How many times have you seen a side match it with Melbourne for 50 or 60 minutes and then they just fall off in the end? You've got to have that intensity, and I think there are sides in the top 8 that can do that. But yeah, Melbourne now up to second on the ladder will be very hard to dislodge there, and they'll be looking to knock Canberra out of top spot before the end of the year.
Yeah, Melbourne look like they might just coast along to that minor premiership win. So moving now to the next game, Chris, I'll stick with you. The Warriors went down to the Dolphins by 2 points in a heartbreaking for me last-minute try. It was a bit of a weird one where I think that they scored the winning try. There was still a minute left on the clock. But what did you make of that game? Dolphins, probably the most entertaining team in the league at the moment, to be honest.
I enjoy watching the Dolphins. I love the Warriors' story. They deserve a little bit of luck. I've just dug out their injury list at the moment that they're carrying. Wade Egan will be back next week, but that didn't help on the weekend. They were without Harris Tavita, without Fisher Harris, without Leatua, Rocco Berry, Viamunga, Mitch Barnett, Luke Metcalf. Now, that has really cruelled their season. And I hope they get Egan back and Harris Tavita back, and maybe Fisher Harris can come back a week early if they're a little bit lucky, because they've got a monstrous challenge now. They are in a flat foot race for for the bottom half of the top four and to get themselves a home final on the way through somewhere in there, where they're one game or half a game ahead of Penrith and one game ahead of the teams below. So, having said that, the Dolphins, how many times have they done this to sides? They've come back from unwinnable situations. They had a man in the bin. They've got their own injury toll to deal with as well. They never give up, and will probably be the first side in NRL history to disprove the Wayne Bennett curse, that when he leaves you as a coach, you go backwards, because they're in a good position. Their game against Sydney this weekend, I've been looking ahead, we'll talk about it later, but their game against Sydney this weekend, that has some massive implications on sides further down the ladder. It also has massive implications on who might make the top 8. But they're a very, very fun side to watch.
Want to have a look, Lee, later at the run home for Warriors, Panthers, Sharks, and see how that compares. But yeah, I think for the Dolphins, it probably they've had a maybe, and as Chris pointed out, they won with grit quite a few times. Because if you looked at their season, you'd say, they either put 60 on the board or maybe they get figured out by a very good defensive side, but it's not really like that at all. Their scoring profile is clearly very high, but to be able to win like that in the face of some of their own injuries, that's a really nice string, I guess, to have to their bow, that they can win in multiple different ways. And, a maiden finals appearance, a distinct possibility.
I'd like to go on a slightly different angle from this, Phoenix. Both the boys there have just mentioned in their assessment the word injury. In the NRL each week, there is at least over 80 players out of the competition each week for one reason or another. Okay? Now, do some quick maths, and that's an awful lot of players and the equivalent of an awful lot of squads. The game and contact sport in general, is obsessed with what happens above the neck in terms of the injuries, the concussions and whatnot. What about below the neck? Some of these players are putting their bodies through absolute pain each week. The game is obsessed with getting fast rucks, ball boys and ball girls throwing the ball in quickly, shot clocks and whatnot. The game is obsessed with speeding it up. These players are falling to bits. And I will never be quiet until we start to reverse this, because some of these players, unfortunately, are going to get into their 40s and 50s but really struggle with injuries from back in the day. They're going to struggle to walk, they're going to struggle to sit down, they're going to struggle to play with their grandkids. It's absolutely awful what goes on, and I'm really passionate about it, and we can't brush over this forever, because...
Lee, please tell me you want to bring back the 5 metres, not the 10. Because
I tell you what I would do, maybe 8 metres, something like that.
Well, it needs to be less than 10, and sorry to hijack, this is one of my hobby horses, because for a highly tuned athlete, they reach peak velocity at 10 metres. You've got the defensive line coming from 10 metres back. You've got the offensive line or the attacking line coming from 10 metres here. You've got two guys, and it creates spectacular collisions. It's great to watch, but you've got people coming at each other, bang, at peak speed. And it needs to be slowed down, and it's not just the head injuries. You're right; it's the rest of the body. It's the sprains and the joint.
Throw on top of that, Chris, we're now a national rugby league. So the Dolphins flew to New Zealand 3 hours on a air-pressured Iron Bird, and time difference and whatnot. Not sleeping in their own beds. All these things matter, and then the turnarounds. Some of these players are travelling big distances and then going on a 5-day turnaround somewhere else. It has to change. It absolutely has to change. And I've just knocked half the things off on my bed.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was. Yeah, in the last few weeks, what have we had? Broken collarbones, broken forearm, hamstrings at ballistic pace, and that type of stuff. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of evidence suggesting that it is, there's a lot of speed of the game related collision injuries.
I just want you to know, Phoenix, that knock of the thing off the desk was actually accidental. It wasn't my anger. I wasn't swinging.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never seen you get so passionate on this podcast yet that you've knocked everything off the desk.
I know a lot of these people, that 16, 17-year-olds getting knee reconstructions, 21-year-olds getting shoulder reconstructions, pectoral tears. I mean, when did this happen 20 years ago?
Yeah. No, that's honestly the first time I've heard of people trying to push the agenda of slowing down the game, which I
think I've just torn my pectoral hitting that thing off.
I have to also call out, that is the most poetic way I've ever heard someone describe a plane. What's it called? Metallic flying bird. All right. So speaking of injuries, then let's move on to the next game, Lee. So Broncos absolutely demolishing Wayne Bennett's Rabbitohs, who can only muster up 14 points. But again, they are ravaged by injuries this year.
Like I said, I've been off the drink for nearly 6 weeks. I've been training a little bit. Benny, give me a call. I'm ready. I was at a funeral of an old South guy on Tuesday, John Bissell, God rest his soul. And they're that passionate, the South fans. They were saying that, two things they were saying. Number one, the funeral was better attended than a Sydney Roosters game. Number two, they were saying that no Sydney Roosters fans were allowed in the funeral. Sorry, that's not much analysis on the game. But honestly, I think we can write that one off. I mean, Broncos were always going to bite back, weren't they, after losing to Parramatta, and South, the last thing they needed was a trip to Brisbane.
Did you expect also, Lee, the Walsh bite back, if you will? That was probably expected too. It was Broncos' highest score in 14 years, 2011, and he obviously had a fair say in about half of that score.
But I also think that we have to put it a little bit into context too, because of the level of the opposition. I'm not taking too much away from him, I don't think, by saying that. He's still got to prove some things over the next few weeks.
Well, Souths played that game with a 17-man squad and no 18th player because they'd named Mamazelos as their 18th man. Mm-hmm. I still can't quite work out how we get from A to B here. They name a squad, Mamazelos is the 18th man, and then somewhere between the final squad being listed and the Rabbitohs taking the field, Mamazelos then fails a head injury assessment for concussion. And I don't quite work out how you can name a guy who then fails the concussion test that close to game time as your reserve. But they've got a full team. They've got 13 out, either injured or suspended. It's going to be ugly for Souths from here.
Yeah, and if he fails that test, you're thinking that's another 10 or 12 days from here. Plus they lose Gray to injury. So, yeah, where does the reinforcements come? They've got some serious problems fielding a full group. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand where they're going to be pulling these new players from, but all the best to them. It's not looking good. They've only got a couple of more rounds left in the season, but that wooden spoon seems to be locked in for them. Moving now to the next game, the Titans-Panthers. Probably the most dramatic game of the round, Darren. So obviously a lot of talking points out of this one. First of all, Nathan Cleary absolutely clutch with that 2-pointer, but also need to point out Mitch Kenny's pass back to Nathan Cleary was amazing. That was like a 30-meter pass. And then the Penrith trainer running in front of the kicker, Ivan Cleary calling it an honest mistake. Again, still the same team that got in trouble for pouring water on the ball earlier this year. Take your pick on where you want to start with that one, Darren.
Yeah, crucial stage. Obviously, 26-24 at the point of that kick. They'd come from 24 points down. It would have been an incredibly famous victory for the Titans had they been able to muster that result. Penrith come up clutch and putting it in context, clearly not their best performance of the season, but when we look at the other sides getting beaten around them, their fixture gets tougher from here. Obviously, they've got, I think, Raiders, Bulldogs, Storm in a block of matches, which is going to define what it looks like for them. But you're not always going to have it on your own terms. I mean, they did, then they lost control, and then they found a way to win, which is what they do. And I reckon, Chris, they would be probably on form favourites to grab fourth, but their draw is still harder than both the Sharks, in particular the Sharks, and the Warriors, who are banged up completely with their own injury issues.
Well, the question with Penrith is their draw, and they have a tough draw. The Bulldogs have a tougher draw. And it is entirely possible, and we can come back to this later, but it's entirely possible the Bulldogs finish as low as 6th or 7th, and that wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't like to be in the Warriors' shoes, but they've got grit, as we've discussed already. They might hang on. Penrith are looking at a top 4 spot, and if they can get that top 4, they're going to be very, very hard to stop. It'll be a cracking final series too.
On the subject of the trainer, everybody misheard Ivan Cleary when he said honest mistake. He actually said honest piss take. The Penrith players were laughing apparently behind the like. Honestly, I've coached plenty. You do as much gamesmanship as you can. I often train my ball boys and ball girls to slow the ball down when the opposition get a penalty, things like that. So yeah,
it's nothing new. There was a game in Canberra versus Balmain, I think it was, in 1989. I can't remember whether it was the grand final or one of the regular season games or early or in the final season. But I just remember Canberra were lining up for a shot at goal, and there was a goofy trainer from Balmain standing under the coast going like this, and the New South Wales Rugby League at that time said, well, there's no law against it, we will now make a law against it. It's nothing new. But, for mine, in those circumstances, in any circumstance, let the goal kicker do his job. If you interfere with him in any way, let him take that shot, then put him in front of the sticks and let him have another go. I think it needs to be a severe in-game penalty, not just a fine and a suspension down the track. It needs to be something that is immediately dished out. But it was a piss take. You're right, Lee.
There's nothing in the way. He had 50 metres of open space. There could be no ambiguity around what was going on for you to miss that. And without divulging too much, I'll quickly have a look at the run home for those respective sides. So you got Bulldogs 14 wins, they're 2 games clear. Warriors, they're in third. Warriors 12, Panthers 11.5, Broncos 11, Sharks 12, but played an extra game. So just quickly looking at those, Bulldogs play Warriors, Roosters, Storm, Panthers, Sharks. So that's clearly tricky. They'd start definitely favourites in one. Warriors play the Bulldogs, the Dragons, the Titans, the Eels, and Manly. So that's not awful. Cronulla play, they've got Dragons, Titans, Knights, and Bulldogs. So they'll start favourites in 3 of the 4 and decent chance in the other. Then you got the Panthers who play the Knights, should win. Then they've got Storm, Raiders, Bulldogs, Dragons. So no sitters in that lot by any means. And then the Broncos, I guess, just finally, they've got the Storm, tricky, Dolphins tricky, Knights should win, Cowboys should win, and then the Storm again. So based on that, on face value, Chris, who do you favour? That the Sharks have got the best run, but they do have one less game.
Sharks have got a good run. Raiders have got a pretty good run. That game against Penrith becomes a real finals trial for them. I still think the Raiders, because you've got Melbourne and Brisbane now competing for similar turf on the territory, on the table. You've got those 2 sides there. If those games get split, and I have no reason to doubt that they won't, I think that's what will happen. Melbourne will win 1, Brisbane will win 1. That's probably enough off the back of the Bulldogs, and you said their draw's not easy. I think it's horrendous, and they've beaten one side in the top 8 all season by my mental arithmetic, and that was Canberra back a long time ago on a day that I then wanted to go and jump off the back of the GIO grandstand. That was a horror day for Raiders fans. But I, unless I'm mistaken, the only side they've beaten in the top 8 this season is that side. They've had, and this is not a criticism, and this is nothing other than observation, they've had a soft draw for the duration of the season, and it gets really hard really quickly. And we all know, when you've been playing at this level and then suddenly everything goes up to here, which it does for the next 5 weeks for them, that's a hell of a challenge. They might be good enough. I have big question marks about whether they are. They need to win 4 of 5 to overtake Canberra. Melbourne need to win 4. Canberra need to win 3 games and rely on 1 loss from Melbourne and 1 loss from the Bulldogs in the minor premierships. Theirs against West Tigers in round 26.
Yep, absolutely. So sticking with you, Chris, let's talk about that Raiders game that lost to the Dragons. First of all, big ups to the Dragons, but they are quite a confusing team. They've taken a couple of very good scalps this year. They've come close a lot. And then the biggest scalp this year, I reckon, so far was that game against the Raiders.
Look, they were up for it. Mathematically, they can still make the 8. They need to win out. They need a few other results to go their way, but they're not completely out of it. They needed to start it by winning there. They came out. They know the conditions. They know how to play that ground when it gets wet and windy. Canberra just, I said it in the call, Canberra went back to the kind of football we'd seen them play in previous years, where before the game they decided to just screw the heads off, put the pumpkins on, and went out and played pumpkin head ball for about 75 minutes. The last 5 minutes from the Raiders was actually quite entertaining. The first 75 minutes was awful. Fogarty with 2 kicks for touch that I don't know what he was trying to do, whether he was trying to ride the wind which was coming across the field. and misjudged it. But both times he went for too much distance and didn't find touch. They went for a short line dropout when there was no need to. There was a lot of drop ball. The error count was horrendous. But having said that, for the past few weeks, I think the Raiders have been playing down to the level of their opposition. They played down to the level that St George had previously displayed, and St George was smart and came in and they took over. They took the initiative, and they stopped the Raiders scoring points with a massive wind at their back. Well done to the Dragons. You've given your fans a little bit of hope. There are fans saying that it was the Raiders' loss that they need to have. I do not subscribe to that theory in any way, shape or form.
I'm going to jump on this, Chris, because was it last week, Phoenix, that I said Canberra could benefit from losing a game? Did I say that last week? I'll tell you why. The best Premiership winning side over the last 5 years has been Penrith, correct? So Penrith won 17 straight to get to the 2020 grand final, but lost that one. So there's a scheme of thought in this game. At the same topic, boys, that I said the game is too fast and players are getting injured. Can you imagine how hard it is to get up mentally for each fixture every week with this going on? Okay. Penrith won 17 straight, but then probably run out of a little bit of gas in 2020. Last year, they won 5 straight, but they actually lost to Canberra in round 25. In 2023, they won 4 straight to win the Premiership. 2022, they won 3 straight, and that was just in the finals. They lost the last game of the competition. I think they rested players. So Ivan Cleary was actually at a stage where he could manufacture a loss by resting some players. And 2021, they won 3 straight after losing their first finals game. And it probably hardened them up losing that first finals game. When you win, I have a favourite phrase related to life and coaching. Complacency is a disease. And when you win, when you do well for half a game, like Canberra Raiders are very good at doing, and then relax for a bit and still win the game, you probably need to lose to achieve that. It doesn't matter what the coach says, it doesn't matter what the media guys say in and around Canberra, it doesn't matter what any of us say. Those players will start to believe in their own press. Getting beaten by a side that's so inconsistent, I'm sorry, Mr. Pride, but your Dragons are really inconsistent. Getting beaten by them will have been manna from heaven by Ricky Stewart. I really do believe that. And then if you look at sorry, Chris, if you look at Penrith, to win the Premiership, they probably need to win something like, is it 11 straight, something like that, 12 straight, something like that.
Probably more, yeah. Yeah, and look, I'll throw it to you, Chris. I mean, I get the point there. I'm never one who subscribes that it helps you to lose, but I don't think it necessarily hurts you, if that makes sense. Like, I think you can turn it into something educational in that sense. I always feel the best thing you could do in that situation is, during a long winning streak, you get challenged a few times, and then within the game, you work on that challenge, you respond, and you find a way to win, and then your confidence grows from there. If your maturity's okay, you'll be fine. There's always that fear that if you drop a game like that it, maybe in 1 or 2 players, it plants a seed of doubt for whatever reason. But I think they're probably mature enough to handle that, in the sense that, they can go away and say, look, you face conditions you don't normally face. You faced an opposition that was hungry and asked you some questions, didn't handle it necessarily as well as you would have liked. How do we deal with that next time around? So, yeah, I'm always one that thinks it doesn't help you, but it doesn't have to hurt.
I just would have liked to have seen them win that one, win against Manly this week. Then things get easier. They start to actually be in a position where they can potentially rest players. If they lose the game if they could be in a position where they could lose the game against the West Tigers and or lose the game against the Dolphins.
The minor premiership doesn't matter that much. It really doesn't. As long as you finish
the clubs
1 or 2.
Don't have a lot of money, because it's 200 something grand when you win it.
The other factor that comes into these games at this time of year is how they manage that physical workload. So, for example, Penrith have to keep winning, okay? So Ivan Cleary doesn't have the same luxury he had for the previous 4 or 5 years. Canberra don't need to keep winning, quite frankly, and they can still win the Mario Premiership. They've still got a bye to throw in there, remember. They've got some good home games that they should fancy themselves, and they've got a cushion. And then Melbourne Storm, traditionally, and they've had plenty of practice over the last 2 decades, will actually physically put their players through some tougher training in and around these rounds, and then taper off towards the finals. So do you remember last week you asked me, Phoenix, about what each team will be looking at in the top 10, and I said it's different well, this is exactly what's unfolding, I think. And I only saw bits of the game until I watched some of it back. I don't think Ricky went absolutely ballistic on the sideline when they were losing this weekend. I think he possibly expected it. He's an old warhorse coach. He knows the road. I know you're a passionate Canberra man, Chris, but honestly, write it off, move on, flog man.
Look, they've got to, but they're up against a Manly side this week who are now in a must-win game. Then they've got the bye. If Manly come out, and Manly's a bogey side for Canberra. If Manly come out and do a Sea Eagles on Canberra again this week, suddenly the Raiders go into the bye off the back of 2 losses up against Penrith in the Mudgee game, which is one of their big fixtures. It changes their whole equation and their whole mindset. If they're good enough, they'll win this week. I just rather would have seen them get the win there, get the wins on the board, and as you talked about, manage the squad. If they'd won on the weekend, win this week, and then they've got the bye, they're virtually unassailable for top spot. As it is, Melbourne are still breathing down their neck. But having said that, Melbourne and the Bulldogs, the next 2 teams down, have 4 or 5 games against top 8 opposition. Canberra has 1 plus a bye. So it's not the end of the world. I just would have rather seen the Raiders control the narrative a little bit better than they're going to be able to for the next week or 2.
Yep. Absolutely. So, speaking of Manly, Lee, I'll throw to you. So, just on their game with the Roosters, they went down 4-20. That was a good opportunity for them. So, what did you take away from that loss to the Roosters?
It was almost a metaphor for Manly's problems all year, really. It also overshadowed 250 games for Luke Brooks, which is an excellent achievement. I used to call Luke Brooks the weatherman because he was the only guy who could keep his job even though he only did it right every 4 weeks. But ever since he's gone to Manly, he's not been a bad player at all. And his move to Manly showed that his club and the coaching and expectation at West Tigers was the problem as much as he was. I think that Manly are in real trouble. Sowie, many, many weeks back, said they were in trouble. I now join him in that chorus, and they've got to go to Canberra next week. I honestly think they will get their pants pulled down. Their best player is Tom Trbojevic. They're not playing him in his best position. There's so much wrong. And talk about injuries. They always seem to have an injury of some kind pop up out of each game. So I think they're in real trouble, and it's do or die this week.
Yeah, they're a game and 165-point difference with the Dolphins, who occupy 8th spot. They probably have to beat at least 2 of Warriors, Dolphins, obviously in an absolute must-win game, and Raiders from here. They might have to beat all of them. So, I think, Chris, they've fallen over their own feet too many times this year. They've had some great results beating the Storm and other bits and pieces along the way, but just when you think, maybe they've recaptured what drove them into the finals last year, they go and do something like this.
Yeah, I just think it's a banana skin this week for the Raiders. I think Manly will bounce back, but they have their own issues, but they're in must-win territory. As you said, there's another must-win game next weekend that we'll get to that also has major impact at the bottom half. If you start talking about the mathematical chances, we can see 4 teams officially wiped out of the finals this weekend based on one result. But I'll come to that later.
Oh, I love it. A little bit of a sting. I'll stick with you though, Chris, because one of the other, probably the most other entertaining game of the round, West Tigers getting over the Bulldogs. Pretty surprising there. Emotionally, one of the best games to watch. There was a lot of fire between Luai and Galvin, of course. So what did you take away from that one?
That Jerome Luai and young Mr. Galvin don't hate each other as much as it's played up to in the media.
Absolutely.
It reinforces my thoughts that the Bulldogs have had a very good draw and are higher on the ladder than they deserve to be. And that rugby league can still be fun even when it is absolutely biblically coming down and there are people standing around in Homebush with large amounts of timber, this many cubits long and that many cubits high, and gathering the lions and the tigers and the elephants 2 by 2, because it was that kind of a weekend. And a big thumbs up to whoever was in charge of the grounds this weekend, because some of them had some pretty heavy traffic and they held up pretty well. So, but it was a fun game. The Tigers, they like St George, they could, if they put on a run from here, they can get to 30 points, and 30 points could actually get them up as high as 7th on the table, but they're not going to. But they did what they had to do. They've sown the seed of perhaps they've sown a seed of doubt in Canterbury, but it was just a really fun, enjoyable game, especially from someone who supports a team that needed the Bulldogs to lose. So I enjoyed it probably more than a lot of other people.
What's happening, Phoenix, is the teams that were out of contention a few weeks ago, the pressure's off them. So they're playing like teams without pressure. And then as soon as the pressure comes back on again, you'll start to see why they weren't in those places earlier in the season. So that's what I think's unfolding too.
I mean, if you look at it, I'll expand on my point before. If you look at it, if Brisbane or Cronulla or the Dolphins lose out, or win just one game, they finish on 30 or 32 points. The Dolphins finish on 26. If the Tigers go on a run or St George go on a run, they can finish on 30. It's not mission impossible. It's mission very, very, very difficult. But those sides, they do need to start winning, and they would be aware, the sides that still have a mathematical chance, horrible words to use, but they'll know that they've got it. And you're talking St George and the Tigers, probably not North Queensland after yesterday.
I love the mathematical chance talk that starts right at the end of the season, where there's still. But that's the great thing about this league right now, is that there are still so many possibilities of the way that the ladder can end at the end of the season. So, moving now to I'll go to you, Darren. So the Sharks, again, one of those teams that are just making a bit of a run for it towards the end there. They got over the Cowboys, who have been pretty disappointing this year, 32-12. What were your takeaway?
Yeah, I guess that on that last point, the two worst phrases you could probably hear in sport are mathematical chances and full support of the board would be the other one. But yeah, the Cowboys, that's probably a comment that's not too far away from popping up for them, is full support of the board coming out somewhere along the way. It's just getting worse for them. That was pretty ugly. The Sharks are, I know, there were some controversial comments last week around them from our man Retro that attracted some interest. But they're building ahead of steam, and there's certainly a chance on the draw to win every one of their matches from here on in, and obviously they get the bye as well, and really push for that top four, which most of us thought they were probably going to do at the start of the season, and maybe, Lee, they're the ones that are going to time their run.
Unlike our boy Retro, I stayed awake to watch Cronulla Sharks. When we are talking about the travails of Coach Payton, when I look at a team that's struggling, I look at some of the key things, the little effort areas, and they sometimes in under 11s and under 12s and under 13s, no matter what you try and coach a defence, they will spread out, because they're so worried about the people in the opposition team. And that's exactly how the Cowboys seemed yesterday at times. They lack confidence on the man on their inside and their outside, so they spread out in defence. There were some tries where the Sharks just literally walked through them. And then on top of that, in the first half, the Cowboys only completed 6 of 14 sets and missed 23 tackles. So, honestly, it's so obvious to me that there's technical deficiencies in that side defensively. I've talked about those all year on this Loose Carry podcast. I won't repeat that again, but I mean, when you're only completing 6 of your 14 sets, and yes, you can blame the wet weather, but in each of these games, the opposition have completed more. So one team has been able to navigate it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so moving now to probably biggest story of the week. So I'll go to you, Chris, for this one. So the Perth Bears potentially taking Munster and a Jonah Pezzett. What are your thoughts on this one here?
They're going to tie up a lot of the salary cap taking Cameron Munster, but if there was one player that you were going to tie up a lot of the salary cap on, he'd be on any list, whichever way you slice it. He's going to be one of the players you want. Whether they get him is another question. The Storm don't let players go without a good reason. We've seen that in the past, that they've let plenty of good, even brilliant players go who have failed then to achieve at that same high level. But you need a name. You need someone to build a franchise around. Mal Meninga's a lovely guy. I can pick up the phone and call Mal if I need to. I don't know how much currency he carries in Perth just because he was a rugby league great of the 80s and 90s. There will be people over there in the rugby league community who know him. But outside of that, how many people know who Mal Meninga is? Whereas if you get someone like a Munster or of that ilk, or a Pappenhausen, or one of these players, and I know Jerome Hughes was on their list, but the Storm have wrapped him up. You get a player of that ilk, you can then start showing to the people of Perth, here's what this guy is doing on the field now. This is what you're going to see when you get your own rugby league team in a couple of seasons' time. So I'd love to know who else is on their target list. I think they're going to take more of the Dolphins approach, where they're going to go for one or two big-name players, and they're going to look around for the players who are perhaps feeling a little bit hard done by, and try and pick those players up. So if you're a fringe player who can produce the goods, but you don't get the opportunity, hypothetically, Jed Stewart at Canberra, who, when the Raiders have their full squad fit, Jed's probably about number 22 or 23 in that squad. But he's a capable player, as he's shown. So, I think that's where they're going to go. The Perth side are going to look at these younger players and these fringe players, like the Dolphins did, with players who had a bit of a buzz about them, but who've now grown another leg in an environment where they feel part of something new and exciting.
I think Mal Meninga is a far better coach than people gave him credit for, but he was also the head of culture or something like that at the Titans for the last 4 years, and I think he was responsible for overseeing a lot of their recruitment. Look at where the Titans are now. I am not convinced Mal Meninga is the greatest recruiter yet, but I stand here ready to be proven wrong.
Is he the genuine recruiter, or is he the figurehead coach that they've got him as for marketing purposes?
And then also who does he choose to recruit his players? And that's a really important thing too, getting the right people underneath you.
Yeah, well, a few weeks ago, Darren and I did a video with Chad Townsend about who the Perth Bears should sign for their spine. Cam Munster wasn't on that list, but we did talk about Jerome Hughes being like their marquee player. But I think you're right, Chris, in terms of this is somebody that you can sign now that will just get people through the gates and build that team, largely from the get-go. Did you have anything on that one, Darren?
Yeah, just that I think that was the main talking point when we did that, was that the Storm were in active negotiations to lock away half a dozen players. And as Chris said, if Munster is someone that they would be prepared to release, my brain would immediately go to, well, why? What's the thought process around that? But but he'd be a terrific starting point. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good one to build a team around. So, last thing before we get to the round 23 preview. So, Lee, you brought this one to the rundown. So, the old 4-conference system. Do you want to run us through this one?
Michael Chamas in the Sydney Morning Herald wrote a massive piece on Friday proposing a 4-conference system in the NRL and 20 teams. It basically works like this. There's an Eastern, Northern, Southern and Western Conference. Eastern, for example, includes the Roosters, the Rabbits, St George, Cronulla and Manly. Western, Parramatta, Penrith, Canterbury, West Tigers and Perth Bears are in there too. I won't list all the teams and all the other ones, but basically the idea being that every team plays each other once across the conferences, and then they play the second game against a team in their conference. And the idea being that these will be money spinners for the NRL. For example, South will play Sydney Roosters twice. The Broncos will play the Cowboys twice, and also the Dolphins and the Titans twice, etc., etc. And then a 10-team final series. I won't go into detail about that. But the idea is that at the same time as reducing player workload, which myself and Chris support, and also bringing in 20 teams, that to me, that's probably the best system I've seen so far, Chris, but I know you're going to argue with me.
Well, I think we keep it simple. Rugby league is, in essence, a simple game. If you have 20 teams and you want to reduce player workload, you say, right, everyone plays everyone once. There's 19 games, and there is a fair, balanced draw. And if Canberra play Brisbane at Suncorp Stadium this year, Canberra play Brisbane at GIO Stadium next year, and it just becomes an alternating system. It also means that you could, for instance, I don't know, heaven forbid, turn State of Origin into 3 weekend carnivals. So have one after round 6, one after round 9, one after round 12, picking numbers out of the hat there. But on Origin weekends, imagine if you had, let's say, Thursday night you have your under-19 Origin game. Friday night you have a women's Origin game, a New Zealand versus Pacific Islands Test match. Saturday afternoon we go to Roma for a Queensland country versus New South Wales country game. Saturday night we have the New South Wales Cup rep versus the Queensland Cup rep, and then Sunday at 6 o'clock in the evening or 7 o'clock in the evening you kick off your Origin. You have your main event. You turn Origin into a nationwide carnival 3 times across the course of the season. You cut games out of the regular season. Job done.
Chris, you're not that far off what Cham has said too in terms of reducing the Origin window, which I'm a big fan of, and also creating an international window. The only difference was that from your plan really was that he wanted the second game against the other opposition, and the issue with that, Darren, I'll go to you next. The thing with the extra game is about bringing money in for the clubs. So we forget this as fans. Sometimes we just want to, we look at the integrity of a competition, don't we? And you're right, Chris, 19 games, everybody plays, everybody wants, has an element of integrity. But the clubs want more money to come in through crowds and through TV money, etc., etc., and broadcasters need the right amount of content.
Yeah, it looks a bit like the NFL model, where you obviously have the national and the American conferences, if you will, and then the groups within that, where, I mean, sometimes in that competition you might go 4 years without playing someone, and in that same time you might play another side 7 times. So it's it's interesting. I am one that I think the best way for all competitions that are expanding, so NRL 17 to 18, AFL 18 to 19, is that you play everyone ideally once. And yeah, you might look at a disparity in a fixture and think, oh, gee, we've been to Canberra 4 times in 5 years, but we've only hosted them once. It would help you alleviate that with just simply an alternate basis. So yeah, I'm probably one who thinks that nirvana, if you will, in sport is that you play everyone once.
If you're going to have conferences, there's an easy way of doing it, and don't have them as fixed conferences. Have team one in. So if you have 4 conferences, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then 5, 6, 7, 8, then 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, 14, 15, 16. And then you've got your conferences for the first year. Then in the next year, all the teams that finished first in their conference, they go into, funnily enough, Conference 1. All the teams that finished in Conference 2, finished second place, don't go into Conference 2. Because the NFL, you mentioned the NFL, Darren, they have a system like that where you play additional games against teams that finished on the same level as you last year. I wouldn't have a problem with that. It would also give the NRL their seemingly much desired wildcard games as well. So I just don't think that the geographic thing winds up being fair. I get that it'd be great to have St George play Souths twice every season. I get that every year it would be great to have Brisbane play the Gold Coast or Brisbane play the Dolphins twice every season. But at the same time, it's not necessarily a fair. It's not as fair a system as it could be.
Money talks, though, doesn't it? Unfortunately,
it does. Yeah.
And I think Phoenix would like a New Zealand conference because the Warriors would win that every year, and Chris, you'd like an ACT conference, and Darren would like a Victoria conference.
Melbourne every year.
I guess that the one question I would have more broadly: do we think it's possible to ever make the fixture completely fair, or is it just, can we just make it as fair as we possibly can?
That's why they expand the final series, to alleviate this problem.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you got variables where clearly like the Warriors, the Raiders, the Storm, and soon Perth are going to travel more than everyone else. That's undeniable. The Queensland teams are going to travel a little bit more than the New South Wales teams. So there's always disparities. It's just, how do you alleviate
Peter
that
Volandis is marketing rugby league like Donald Trump markets America. Make rugby league great again. In the 90s, you had 20 teams for a while. You had more than one game on any given day in Sydney. You had every grade playing. That's starting to happen more and more again. You also had an Ashes series. And that's exactly how Peter Volandis is marketing the game.
All right, I'm going to wrap up this conversation because I feel like we need to do a whole other podcast on ways that we can fix the fixture and the draw and the conference systems. But that is a great discussion. There's lots of things to take out from there. So, but we are running low on time. So quickly, let's go to that round 23 preview. What games are we looking forward to? It's an absolute banger of a round. There's not too many bad games there. So I'll start with you, Darren.
The obvious one would have been to go to Thursday, Storm Broncos, but I'm going to go a couple of days later and go Bulldogs Warriors for mine.
Yep. Lee?
Look, there's great fixtures next week. Storm Broncos, Canberra Manly, St George and the Sharks, which is a rivalry. The Dogs versus your Warriors, which is another big game. The most interesting game for me, though, is the Titans versus Souths. And if you're looking for a shock of the round, the shock will be one of those teams will win a game.
And what about you, Chris?
Well, obviously, I'm looking forward to Friday night, Canberra v Manly here in Canberra. But the big one for me is Sunday afternoon, the Dolphins-Roosters game. Why is that? Yes, it's 8 versus 9. But the travel agents are going to be watching that. If the Dolphins win, they go to 28 competition points. Souths, the most they can reach is 26. The Gold Coast, the most they can reach is 26. Parramatta, the most they can reach is 28. Newcastle, the most they can reach is 28. And they have more than 300 points for and against differential to overcome if the Dolphins win. So if the Dolphins win, 4 sides instantly start going to the travel agent and confirming all those Mad Monday bookings. So that's the one that I'm looking at for this week.
Absolutely, that is and it's going to be a great game in itself too. So all right, that wraps it up for this episode of Loose Carry. So we'll do the plugs. Darren, what do you got going on?
Not a stack of a lot actually. It's pretty, just taking in a lot of football and enjoying it, and I'm basically here to assist wherever required on anything you might want.
Absolutely. And then Lee Addison, rugby league coach.
I'm going to go for a run.
Yep.
And then I'm going to go onto my website, rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. And then I'm going to read my book, Rugby League Coach, 13 Engaging Conversations, Transform Your Coaching. And then I'm going to book myself as a mentor for coaches, and then also book on my Ashes tour at the end of the year, which Chris is coming on. I've just offered him a spot.
So you're a bit busier than me then.
And Chris Coleman, again, thank you for coming on. Great debut, if I must say so myself. And what do you got going on? Where can the people find you?
Well, would you believe you've actually got me at the start of something that's very rare in rugby league world, a 2-week holiday. So I'm actually not on commentary this weekend, but the Raiders on Mix team will be. And wherever you are around the world, mix106.com.au is where you can listen in. So if the TV guys drive you nuts and you want to hear a really pro-Canberra call that is a lot of fun, then that's where you go.
And that's a radio voice, if ever I've heard. Yeah. Coming to you live from Canberra, Chris Coleman.
Oh, look, I can really put on the big voice if you really want me to. And I'd like to take this opportunity to wish my stepdaughter Danielle a happy 40th birthday this weekend. There you go.
Love it. Well, I reckon when you're done with your holiday and Canberra are firmly in the finals, we'll get you back on the show to pump them up a little bit. But yeah, thanks for your work. Thank you, fellas, and we'll catch you next week.